Okay, let's start with a question. How many of us went to business school when we started up in business?
I expect there won't be a particularly large show of hands.
No, and that's because most of us decided to go into business just doing something that we love, or maybe something that we're really good at doing.
It's usually a little way down the line that we start to reflect on not actually gaining a grounding in the useful things like sales, marketing, finance and operations.
Yeah, and that's when it all starts to feel, well, a bit difficult.
I'm Nikki. I've been running businesses since 2004, and I'm the founder of the Growth Community, which is a place where businesses come to network and support each other's business success.
And I'm James, and I started my business back in 2020, helping businesses, brands and organisations to unlock the power of podcasting, basically using audio as a way to market and grow their business.
Well, in our line of work, we both meet a lot of businesses and we're constantly learning new things from being around them. Every day literally is a business school day.
So we thought, why not grab some of this good stuff and turn it into a podcast? So please take your seats. Class is about to start. Hello class, welcome back. We have a bit of a treat for you today. We have two guests joining Nikki and I. Let's get them to introduce themselves.
Hello, I'm Lisa Betsworth. My business is Slice Solutions, and I suppose really we cover everything people related.
And I'm Kat Derbyshire, and my business is Black Cat HR based in Barnsley, and I'm a HR consultant and mentor, so I help businesses with all things employment law.
Okay, so we've got people, we've got HR, we've got employment law going on there. They're clues as to what we're discussing today.
Indeed. So we're kind of ended up with this hypothetical Steve, haven't we? Steve is this business owner who is trundling his way through being a business owner, which we all know. None of us went to business school, so we haven't got a clue what we're doing. But Steve has now reached the heady heights of wanting to take on a member of staff. So we thought, let's bring in some people who know all about this to help Steve really with making this decision, because making a decision to take on a member of staff is quite a big one, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, from our perspective, one of the areas of the business that we cover is recruitment, and we see this a lot. We get approached by clients that are generally at a point where they may be the only people in the business. They're doing everything themselves. They're the marketeer, the accountant, you name it. And it's just got to the point where it's too much. And I think the first thing you've kind of got to look at is, right, am I working effectively? Am I maxing out my time? And if the answer to both of those is yes, then yeah, it's worth looking at right now. It's time to bring somebody in.
Some people really want to do it, don't they? Some people kind of start a business with the intention of that goal of taking on first member of staff, second member of staff. Other people, it's slightly more grudgingly, they just wanted to do something they enjoy doing, and it became a business, and now they're like, oh heck, probably going to have to take on a member of staff. Perhaps this is maybe more useful for those people. I think someone that wants to do it is probably a little bit more proactive and kind of knows a little bit more about kind of the stuff that's involved. But for someone that maybe is a bit like, kicking and screaming, you're going to have to do this. How difficult is it? Because it's something that I don't have any staff, and I kind of look at it and think, it seems like there's quite a lot of moving parts going on there. It's a bit complicated. What shall I do? I'll just brush it under the carpet. Yeah. That's the solution. Maybe I am Steve. Yeah. Maybe that's why I came up with this character. Secretly, Steve is me. So, yeah. I mean, is it mega complicated?
Without wanting to sound like I'm doing myself a misservice, no, it really isn't. And it's a process. And I think as long as you stick to a certain key points within that process, it can be as easy or as difficult as you want it to be. It's never... You know what, it's never going to be super easy. I don't want to sit there and say, yeah, recruitment's a dream. And it's changed vastly over the years that I've been sort of working in that industry. I can remember a time when you'd press hit on an advert for, say, an administrator, which was a pretty sort of generalist role. You'd almost hold your breath and sit and go, okay, wait for it, because you just knew you were getting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of applications. And there's times where we'd had to turn adverts off because the response rate was just ridiculous. Those days are gone. Yeah. The response rate now is definitely not what it used to be. And I think if you are honest enough and you're looking and you've probably got 10, 15 solid candidates from an advert now to pick from, you've done exceptionally well. So it's tricky from that perspective. But I think if you go through the process that you should do, and I'm really fortunate, I was taught to recruit by somebody who was absolutely phenomenal. And the way in which she taught me is the way I operate now. It hasn't deviated, even though over the years sort of tech's played a massive part in recruitment, and there's a lot of services and systems and all sorts of things out there that in theory make your life easier. But I think if you stay true to the original dark art, as it's sometimes called, of recruitment, you can never really go too far wrong.
Okay.
So for most businesses then, particularly small businesses, what is their first recruit? Because that's quite a big thing, isn't it? Because I think sometimes you can go, oh, I've got loads of admin, I need to have an administrator. But actually that probably isn't your first recruit. It's probably somebody that's going to help you grow the business rather than someone who's just going to support it. But I suppose it depends on the business.
I'd say 100% it depends on the business. And I also think it depends on the owner. I think it depends, if you're at a point where, right, there is not enough hours in the day, the first thing you need to start doing, and I guess this is where HR really comes in, is the first thing you need to start doing is being really honest with yourself, saying, right, where do I need to spend my time? What is most beneficial for me to be doing? And the stuff that isn't beneficial for you to be doing, that's when you need to bring support in. So you've gone past, I'm assuming Steve at this point has gone past the point of outsourcing. It's now too big for that. So now it's a case of, right, let's look at what I need to do. And you might have somebody who, and I know I've got a client who is a bit of an introvert, and he is absolutely brilliant at what he does. He's at a point now where he wants to scale up further, but by his own admission, his growth has been by accident rather than design. And the thought of him actually going out and doing the business development and doing the network strikes the fear of God into him. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. The best thing for him to do would be to bring somebody in to do that. Within my business, I much prefer doing the business development side of things rather than being at my desk sourcing through CVs and looking at everything else. So for me, the right thing to do when I started growing was to bring somebody in to do the office support. So I think it depends on the business and on the business owner.
What's been your experience? Is there a pattern, or is it just really random?
I think the thing is, often, particularly when I speak to clients, they've got to that point where there's too much stuff to do, and in reality, all they know is I'm too busy and I need another pair of hands, which is great. That's the trigger. But the reality is, the next step is, well, actually, what is that thing you want someone to do? Because I'm sure, as Lisa will know better than all of us, you can't really go out there and say, I want someone to do things and stuff, because those people don't.
You can, but you probably won't do very well.
Yeah, you won't find that person. Yeah. So it's getting really clear on what is the help, and then creating a job description, something tangible that you can go out with and actually say, this is what I need for my business. This is what my business does. This is the person I need, and actually recruit on that basis. It's not, I'm too busy, I need a person. Yeah. I think that's the important bit.
And I'm guessing that's probably quite a big pitfall for a lot of businesses.
Definitely, particularly the ones that try and recruit themselves. They've tried, they've not found that person, but actually, when you strip it back, they've gone out there and looked for someone to do things and stuff. They haven't been clear, what is that person? Although administrator does tend to be a popular first choice for lots of businesses I work with, but not the only answer.
No, but again, I think, lots of things. Like you say, the term administrator nowadays is so vast. I mean, we get it all the time. I need an administrator. And then when we start to drill down on, right, exactly like you said, what exactly do you want this administrator to do? It's a generalised term, and actually what this individual wants is somebody to do work in purchase ledger, or they want somebody to work in credit control, but they just term it, like you say, didn't go to business school, as I need an administrator. And I think, again, on attracting candidates, that's where a lot of people go wrong in the title. And I hear it all too often with clients, we're not bothered about titles here. They can call themselves what they want. And that's fine internally as a culture thing. But when you are going out to market and looking for somebody, it is of massive importance what you are putting out there. Because like Kat said, that is what people are going to look for. And if you are a credit controller, you're probably not going to look at adverts that say administrator. So it's making sure that you're getting everything geared, and you've got to be crystal clear with, from the outset, what it is you're looking for.
And I suppose that comes back to the whole tech conversation as well, because computers are very black and white. They search for exact words. And so if you're not putting those exact words out there, you might not even get your advert seen anyway.
Correct.
Yeah. So what would you say the main pitfalls are at this point? I mean, is it better that you have created an organisational structure for your business in order to be able to do this, or is that not essential? Do you need to have that in place?
I would say no, not at that very first employee stage. I think it's good to have further down the line, but at the beginning, when it's your first employee, it really is, what is the help that you need? But I think some of the really important watch outs are what actually is it going to be that person comes in to do, and what other costs might be associated as well as the salary bill. So providing a phone, providing a laptop, whatever it is, a car maybe, whatever the job is going to have other things that cost money that person is going to need. So I guess it's when they're trying to work out what is this bill that comes with this person, they need to be thinking about more than just the salary.
Yeah, and I suppose there's all things like national insurance and pension contributions and all that kind of stuff as well, isn't there?
Absolutely.
It's quite a big list, actually, isn't it?
Yes.
And I think as well from an attraction perspective, and we're going through this with a client at the moment, we have asked him to really consider what he wants from that individual, because there's certain roles, particularly if you're looking down the sales or the business development route, that if you want somebody in that really knows their stuff, that is going to come in, hit the ground running and make an impact on that business from day one, which, let's be honest, if you're looking at sales, that's where we're going. They're going to come to the table with certain expectations. And if those expectations aren't met, you will lose that member of staff. Yeah. So I think this is where HR and recruitment do intertwine. You know, the common misconception is we're one of the same. I wouldn't offend Kat by saying that personally, but you get clients automatically assume HR recruitment is the same thing. It's not. No. It's, you know, this is where at the start you have got to work together, because the culture's got to be right, which is a HR thing, for then the organisation to go out. And again, gone are the days that you can put, I'm looking for this is what I want you to do, and this is what I'm going to pay you, and sit back and expect there to be a flood of candidates. So now you've got to get creative. So like Kat said, if a laptop, a phone, a car is provided, what spec are they? Because ridiculous as it sounds, it might just be that little thing that like flicks somebody's switch or turns them off. You know, I've got a team, my business is completely Android, much to the disgust of a member of my team. Thank you. Because they're Apple. And again, there will be some people, as ridiculous as it seems, goes, nah, do you know what? I'm Apple. I'm not interested. But likewise, you've got to be honest with what you've got. So it's all this kind of stuff that really needs to be pulled out now.
I think these are questions that I want to ask you, Kat, because I am particularly interested in the, I think they're HR issues.
Go on, tell
So I think nowadays people who are perhaps, you know, we're talking specifically about people recruiting their first member of staff. Quite a few people in that situation now will maybe not have an office and will be looking to recruit someone that's going to work remotely, and they'll be thinking about, right, we might get an office further down the line. For now, I'm going to look for someone that's going to work from home.
Yes.
And that's quite different to where we were 3 or 4 years ago, where that was probably quite unusual.
Very much.
And I imagine there's probably some quite different HR considerations that come with that people probably don't think about, in terms of, you know, you do, if you have an office, you do a health and safety, whatever you do, inspection, and make sure that everything works and stuff. If someone's working that way, it's their problem, isn't it? It's their house. So what kind of stuff should people be thinking about, and make sure that they don't gloss over or forget if they're thinking, I'm going to recruit someone remotely, so I don't need to worry about any of that stuff, because that's their problem.
Yeah, which in reality is not true.
I expected that was going to be but
right,
I'm beginning to feel like I know Steve quite well. And I think Steve maybe thought that he could gloss over that slightly.
That's going under the carpet with the rest of it, isn't
it? Let's put Steve right.
Yes, let's put Steve right. So, I mean, first and foremost, you're right. There is a lot more now of either hybrid working, so a mixture of office base and home base, but also pure home working, which, is far more common, particularly since the COVID pandemic. And because someone's not working in your office space doesn't mean you can sort of, turn your back and forget about them. You are still required to make sure they've got a proper place to work. They've got a desk and a chair that's fit for the job. They've got all the equipment that they need. So, it doesn't mean that because they're not sat in your office space that you don't have to do that stuff. You do. It's just that you do need to find more creative ways to do it. Whether you're going to go around to someone's house, you're going to ask them to do it on a Zoom call and go through an assessment. Whatever you're going to do, it doesn't give you the chance to just forget about any of those things. They do need to have a safe, relevant space to work to carry out their job.
Okay. Job descriptions. contracts, employment contracts. Someone that's been a one-man band for a while probably hasn't given themselves an employment contract. They've probably not written themselves a job spec or job description.
Absolutely.
So they're probably starting pretty much from scratch with stuff like that.
Yes.
I'm not suggesting that Steve would again try and skip over that stuff, but how important is that? Is it, does everyone have to do it? What's the starting point? Is it something that's better for people to get someone else to do, so outsource and bring someone in? Can people write an employment contract themselves, or just download Google it, download a template, whatever?
In total honesty,
if you could see Lisa's face right now, it would be,
I'm smiling.
Fear of God.
Yeah, inside I'm going, no. Because ultimately, people do download things from the internet, get it from a friend, whatever it is in terms of employment contracts. But I would never recommend that you do that, because one size does not fit all.
Yep.
Every business is different. The way that your business works will be different to the business next door, and so on. So I would always recommend that you have a purpose-written contract of employment that sets out all the terms that you need to have in there, so that firstly, that employee knows exactly what that relationship is, and secondly, you've met with the law, because actually you do have an obligation to provide that document by day one of employment. And lots of business owners don't realise that, to be fair. But I would never recommend, unless you've got HR or employment law expertise, that you go out and try and write your own employment contract. Absolutely not.
On this
to be
one,
perfectly honest, I think even if you have a third party, because you're in, it's what we do, but I still get an external to write our contracts, because you're too close to it, and sometimes I think you can't see the pitfalls, and then all of a sudden something comes around and you're like, oh, I didn't expect that.
Right. So what we're saying is, I mean, there's some things in business where you think there's a bit of a shortcut there, and maybe it's worth it. This is something where it's just not worth trying to skimp and save.
No, absolutely not.
Like, do it properly. All right, that's
100%.
good.
Yeah.
What about stuff like tax implications? What about stuff like pensions, getting people set up? It's again probably unlikely. Maybe people have been paying into their own private pension, but they've not thought about kind of company pension schemes and stuff like that. And of course, that now is a much bigger deal over the last few years, and will probably continue to be. And actually, maybe something even at the recruitment stage that it needs good thinking about, because I think that is something that people look for, isn't it? Is a good pension scheme now.
And I'm sure probably Lisa will agree that even now, although auto enrolment is a thing, you must provide an auto-enroll pension. It's amazing how many businesses still want to shout about the fact they offer a pension scheme. They have to. It's the law, But yeah, certainly in terms of a business owner factoring in the cost of obviously their own contributions into that scheme, considering whether the person that they're bringing in will meet the criteria to need to be auto-enrolled in that scheme, and also know what needs to happen if someone says, I don't want to be in the scheme, because they still have to put them in there, even if they decide to come straight back out. And these are all things that often business owners don't realise when they're doing this stuff for the first time.
And again, going back to what I was saying about sort of the way you attract being completely different now, things like pensions are a question that we get asked, and that can make the difference between choosing between your job and somebody else's, because that somebody else's may offer 0.5% more contribution to their pension, and that will be something nowadays that will swing it for somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Lisa, you mentioned earlier on about an assumption that Steve is past the point of outsourcing. And at the time I thought, I want to come back to that, because what I want to do is talk a little bit about alternatives, and kind of take it on your first employee. Maybe people think, all right, I probably need to do that, but actually there may be other things that are worth looking at. And I'd be interested in your perspective on whether these are good alternatives or bad alternatives. Outsourcing is one of them. The other is maybe just employing someone on a freelance basis, a couple of days a week, pick their own hours or whatever, just say, I'll just ship this amount of work out to someone. The other, and Lisa, I think you'll have a good perspective on this, is actually seeing whether or not there's work that a VA could do, and maybe it's not the right solution to employ someone first time. So I know I've thrown three things
I know, racking it up in my brain.
There may be other things.
Questions.
There may be other things that I'm not thinking of. So what are your perceptions, and Nikki, you as well on this, to be fair, of alternatives that maybe are worth looking at as part of this?
And this is why I very sort of mindfully said we do everything people, because you're right, Slice does VA as well. And one of the things that we do from my own experience of recruiting is now, in the nicest possible way, every time somebody comes to us, particularly when they are in Steve's situation and go, I need this. Generally, like Kat said, I need an administrator. We don't take that as gospel. It's about scratching the surface and going, right, okay. So the kind of things that you need to think about is, right there, right now, you might be absolutely up to your eyes in it, but what is it that's making you up to your eyes in it? And is that a short-term thing? Are you in the middle of a project that in 3 weeks, 6 months, whatever it might be, is going to end and then things will settle? Or is this an ongoing need? Because if it's not, then you're going to hire somebody and then find yourself either scrambling around for work for them to do because you don't want to be paying them for nothing, or having to let them go, which, let's be honest, nobody wants to do.
Yeah.
So yes, there is a potential that VA can help. The freelance thing, it completely depends on the business, I think. There are pros and cons for both of those situations. The freelance thing works better in some industries than it does in others. You know, yes, you've got that flexibility of, well, I don't need them this week, so I don't have to pay them. But then you've also got the problem of you don't employ them. And because of, without stepping into the minefield that is IR 35 and all of that, it's difficult to then be able to say, I want you to do this, because you don't employ them.
Yeah.
And if you are seen to be putting certain things like that on them, there's a whole heap of hot water you could find yourself in. So again, you need to take advice on that, and it depends very much on the role, the organisation, the industry that you're in. There isn't really a one size fits all.
And you're always up against that fact that if they are not, if you haven't got those guaranteed hours and tasks, which, you know, is how you get outside of your IR35, then if they're busy on another project and you need something doing urgently, you haven't got that person there to jump on what you need, have you? So you're at the mercy of that process too.
Well, look at, you know, when COVID hit, look at the hospitality industry and the retail industry, to be honest with you. A lot of people there were on 0-hour contracts. Now, that worked for the employers and they were all clapping their hands because if it was quiet, they didn't need them, they weren't paying. Christmas, they ramped the hours up. Obviously, when hospitality died a death during COVID, fine, we don't have to pay anybody, we're fine. Everything ramps up when the sort of relaxation kicked in, because all of a sudden we all wanted to get out and go for dinner, and all of a sudden they couldn't find staff because those people that had been so used to working like that had found alternative employment, and that's the risk you run.
Yeah.
Because there was no security for those individuals. And again, you know, the ball's shifted slightly. It's not a case of they're not commodities anymore, they're people and they've got lives and they've got bills to pay, and everybody wants that element of security. There will be some people that will always want to do freelance, 0 hours, however you want to dress it up, because it works for them. But you've got to remember that that's why they're doing it, because it works for them, not because it works for you. And you are going to run the risk of that one time that you really need them, they're not going to be there.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think from a VA perspective, I mean, certainly I use VA services. In fact, I use Lisa's VA services. But for me, it was, you know, I went on quite a journey with this over the course of a year, because, you know, when we talked about this in another episode, the first thing I did was look at all my processes and actually work out, you know, I had VAs doing admin jobs for me that could be automated. Mm-hmm. So, you know, we looked at that and we automated those processes, and then there was no one who needed to do that anymore. And then it was looking at the tasks that did need a human in them and looking at whether those tasks actually were, you know, they were actually adding value somewhere to the business. Because if you're going to spend money on, you know, on someone doing work for you, you've got to be sure that that is adding value somewhere. So it's either giving you time back to do something that is earning you money, or it's doing something that is earning you some money. And I think it's about, you know, if you are getting to that point of busy, to actually stop, take a step back and stare at that before you just go, I need some admin support.
And that is incredibly difficult to do, because when you're a business owner, you tend to find that you're stuck right in the middle of it. And that's something that we do with 99% of our clients that come on, particularly on the VA route, is that we'll sit down and go, right, go away, document a week for us, because we can have a look at that and go, okay, that's a short-term thing. It just needs doing, but it's not going to be a repeat thing. This is something that you can continue doing. This can be automated, right? This needs to stay in, but you don't want to do it. So, and it'll very clearly indicate to you whether VA is right. I would say the tipping point and the difference between VA and then stepping into recruitment is if there is a regular, say 16 hours a week worth of work there that you can't do, don't want to do, because then you are stepping into the realms of, okay, you've got a bona fide part-time vacancy there.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'd say that's what we use as a general rule of thumb.
It makes sense that, yeah. I thought you could refer to 99.7% of clients. I just thought that's very exact. Amazing that you've done that level of research.
Yes, we've done that level of analytics.
How flattering that you would do that for me. What haven't we thought about then? Because we've talked about quite a few things so far in this episode already. I'm guessing there's probably things that we've not even thought of and not even touched on.
One of my questions was probably to Kat, actually, which was, we've got to the point where we're taking this person on and we've done all this other stuff. How much documentation as a minimum is required? Do you need a staff handbook? Do you need a whole suite of policies? How much documentation is required? Because I'm assuming there is a reasonable amount.
Yeah, and that's a question that gets asked a lot, to be fair. What must I do? What must I do with a timescale on it? And what can I choose to do when I feel the time is right? And I guess we've already touched on the contract of employment. That's a must by day one. That's a non-negotiable. The handbook, to be fair, is something that can come later. But I guess I find there's two camps of business owner. The one that says, I just want to get everything done up front so I know what everything is and how it should work, so I get it clear in my head so that I can then implement it, which is what the handbook kind of does in the process of creating it. And then you get the business owner that says, I want to do the bare minimum. The contract is fine for now. That's my legal tick box. And then the handbook I'm going to add on much later. Either's fine. Personally, I think if you can get everything done up front, it makes sense, because you go on that learning journey while you're putting the handbook together, as well as you actually put something out to your new employee and later ones that is actually setting out all of your working procedures. You know what they are. They know what they are. It's about now just consistently applying them. So it helps you not land yourself in hot water by maybe doing things that don't comply with the law once that person starts.
Because I suppose in a lot of ways, the handbook also helps to kind of help your new hire understand your company culture and what's expected of you and how you behave, and there's a lot about that, isn't there? And I think if you're a new person, particularly in a small business, because if you're a new hire in a small business, you tend to be a little bit of a dog's body anyway, because you will have a job, but when you're in a small business, you tend to have to do a bit of everything sometimes, because it's all hands to the pump when something big's happening, isn't it? So having an understanding early on about how things work is quite important, actually.
I think you just hit the nail on the head there. The big word and the one thing that I bang on about all the time is culture. I use my mum as an example of this. My mum was an absolutely awesome PA. I mean, her typing speed and level of accuracy was just out of this world. But if I had, say, I don't know, an MD of a digital marketing firm come forward and say, right, I need a PA. Yeah, on paper, and this is where it goes back to looking at the tech that's come into the recruitment industry, mum would come out as a suitable candidate because she can hit all the points that they technically want. However, my mother, bless her, has not got a clue between the difference of Facebook and TikTok. I mean, as far as she's concerned, TikTok is something a watch does. That's it. So that world would make no sense to her. Whereas if I had the practice manager of an accountancy firm or a law firm, that's more my mum's world. So even though the roles might look exactly the same, the language the individuals are talking within that particular company, the stuff they're dealing with day to day, that's got to be part of it. Because again, they could be the best person in the world technically, but if they don't feel comfortable, and let's be honest, we all spend the majority of our time at work, they don't feel comfortable there, you're going to lose them. You can have all the policies and procedures and everything absolutely nailed on, but ultimately if it's not their tribe and they're not working with the people they should be working with in the world they should be living in, it's not going to stick.
No, it's about it. There is a big element of fitting in, which is something that I always talk to people about when they're actually looking for a job. I always say to people, you need to interview people as much as they interview you.
100%.
Yeah. So important. It's not you going in and against the firing squad. It's for you to go in and make sure that this is the right job for you, because recruitment's not a cheap process.
It's not.
And all the work you're going to do to set all that HR stuff up, it's not a small figure. And if you're going to do this, you need to get it right, don't you? Because it's otherwise it's a very expensive process.
I can remember my first ever hire. It was when I was employed. I was hiring a branch manager for the recruitment firm that I was working with. And I went to my area manager and said, right, I've found her. So she was like, brilliant. Can you send me her CV? I was like, nope. And I just heard this death silence on the end of the phone. And she was like, why? Yeah. And I was like, because you will look at her on paper and think I've lost my mind. So she'd been a porter at Barnsley Hospital. She'd worked in retail. She'd done nothing administrative whatsoever. But I was like, Elisa, I can teach her that. I can show her how to do that. But her as an individual would slot into our team beautifully, and she would have complemented everything. And she was such a lovely little girl. That sounds awful, I can't really say that, but she was. She just needed a start, and she needed a jump. And I had faith in myself that I could teach her the technical stuff that she needed to know. You can't teach somebody to fit in.
Yeah.
And I knew the fitting in was nailed on. That wouldn't be a problem. And we hired her, and ironically enough, fast forward a few years, she's now branch manager.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it just goes to show.
You've got the touch. I think a lot of it's gut.
Absolutely.
A lot of gut in that.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So, I mean, following on from the gut comment, I think some of the things that I talk to people about when they're thinking about recruiting and they are a small business, I know you probably hear this, Lisa, like I do. I'm a small business. What can I offer compared to this massive organisation? They can offer so much more than I can. And I think more than ever now, the small business can offer just as much, but in a very different way, can't
If not
they?
more.
Yeah.
And there are
flexibility.
There are some people now that have got so used to just being a number on the payroll and don't like that actually the concept of being an integral part in a very small machine is a lot more attractive than being a number on 1,000-strong payroll register.
Yeah, definitely.
And that comes down to personality a bit, I think.
Yeah.
Because I know, I mean, from my own experience, I left university. I didn't want to go down the corporate route like everyone I knew was. And I ended up working in small marketing agencies. And the great thing about that is that I learned a shed load more in that environment because I was around everybody. I had my fingers in everything. I got to watch and learn and practice stuff that they were just going from department to department to department, learning their little pigeonhole stuff. And some people want to do that. They want to be in the corporate machine and that makes them happy. But actually small businesses can offer so much more in terms of experience over a smaller period of time that actually you go away with a much wider, offering. And even if you don't stay with the small business for that long and you move on again, it's still a win-win because you've had somebody who's open-minded enough to kind of jump in and do what needs doing. But they've also been, rewarded with all this extra experience, that they can move on with their career.
And I think that I started at a small independent in Sheffield, and she's stood the test of time. Margaret Hayward from A for Appointments, bless her. She's still going strong now, but she taught me everything I know. And she went and she was working for all the high streets, and she'd worked for the Adecos and the Blue Arrows of this world. And she then decided that, right, I'm going to take all the best bits from those big corporates and I'm going to set up. And that, like I say, what she's taught me is kind of what we still to this day stand very, very close to. And it's the stuff that's beyond the everyday treadmill that is seen as recruitment. And again, the training that I got was in an independent. Yes, I went on to work in corporates and the big machines, and I learned some valuable stuff there as well. But the very foundation of my training was with a small business, and I wouldn't have had it any other way.
So I think it's fair to say then, Steve needs to have that kind of attitude a little bit as a small business. He can offer a lot. He's got to be open to teaching. He's got to be open to, sharing the knowledge and giving their new hire a lot of opportunity, but actually for the right person that is much more exciting than whether he's got an espresso in the staff room
and
or whatever.
Like you say, if it doesn't float their boat, that's not your candidate.
Absolutely.
No. Yeah.
I've got one more question, which is, I think everything we've talked about has been really, really good. Is there something that people tend to forget? Is there like a little hidden element to taking on your first employee that everyone always just doesn't really consider? And the answer to this could be no. It could be, I think we've talked about everything. But just for the sake of being thorough, it would be interesting to know if either of you got any thoughts on that.
Just one that springs to mind for me is touching again on the things small businesses can offer that maybe they don't see as being great things to shout about, if you want to use that term. So things that small businesses do, like buy lunch, or allow people to have more flexibility on when they start and end work to fit in with family life. Things like that sometimes can be far more rigid in a corporate environment. In the smaller businesses, I think sometimes they forget to shout about the really great things that maybe seem quite small and insignificant on the surface, but may mean a whole lot to people underneath.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually.
And again, I think it depends who you're talking to, because if you are speaking to somebody that's, say, I don't know, a returner, so someone that maybe have been off on mat leave, worked in the corporate machine, and all of a sudden that candidate sat in front of Steve, it might just be that's by Steve saying, as long as your work gets done, I'm not necessarily needing you to be here 9 to 5. If we need to flex your hours out, and to somebody that's returning to work who may want to do the school run, that is going to be music to their ears, and that is going to be something that a corporate can't match. So it's about knowing.
Yep.
It's not a one-size-fits-all conversation.
And I think that's something small businesses can offer. If you treat people like adults, they act like adults.
Yeah.
So, I think if you've got this kind of deal that's like, this is the work you have to get done. If you do some of it at 10 o'clock at night because that's when you're most productive, that's okay. And if you need to take a duvet day because you're just exhausted, then take it. But, there are certain seasonal parts of our year where it's totally all hands to the pump. We will work long hours and you cannot go on holiday. And as long as you are there for that, we're good. You can have the duvet day. You can, go see this play. And I think that's quite exciting for a lot of people, like particularly people returning to work, because it's so hard being a woman going back to work because it's such a difficult choice.
Oh, we're stepping into a whole other podcast here about flexible working and everything else, but I completely agree. And there are countless studies where people have got rid of holiday allowance and said, take what you need. And then they've taken less than they would have done had they had that definitive. There's all, like I say, it's a whole different podcast for another day, that one. But there are certain things. And you're right. And Kat's just made me think about it. And I don't shout about it, but the girls will never pay for dinner when we're all together. It's always me that says, and I'm not saying this begrudgingly, but it's always me that says, right, I'm stopping at Starbucks. Who wants anything? And they're just things that I do as second nature that you're right. I never had that when I started at work or when I worked for the big guys. You never got that. So it's things like that you need to pull
Can
up.
I come and, can Steve come and work for you?
I've been crying out for a boy to come and work with me, James. Come and play.
Steve.
Oh no, it's Steve.
Steve.
Metaphorically. So at the end of all of our sessions, we've been asking our guests to set some homework for our listeners. Probably it's quite good to do it from both angles. So if we are Steve and we want to go away and actually have a go at actually doing this ourselves, what would you say are the first practical things that Steve can do in order to think about taking on this first employee?
Pen, paper and list writing. So what do you need that individual to do? What sets you apart from the person down the road that on the surface does exactly the same as you? And why would anybody want to come and work with you? Because out of that, you can build your job description, you can build your advert. But if you've got those 3 lists, that's your starting point.
That's a really good starting point.
Yeah, that is. Yeah. And then following on from that, what would you say he needs to think about from an HR perspective?
I think, to be honest, the other thing that sort of pairs up nicely with that is you're going to bring somebody in, it's your first someone. How exactly are you feeling about your own skills, knowledge and ability to actually line manage that person, be their leader, be their manager once they actually arrive in your business, and making sure that, you've got all the tools that you need to be able to deal with that on a personal level. You may or may not have been a manager before of someone, who knows, but that's quite important, I think.
Yeah, and even more so if they're working virtually, because there's a big communicational thing there, isn't there?
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, that's actually really important, because, even if you're a really good leader, that doesn't necessarily make you a good manager, and vice versa, actually.
100%.
Yeah.
Again, whole different podcast.
Okay, well, that's been really useful. I think Steve's got plenty to get on with there, and I think, it gives people a really good insight into at least starting to think about that process.
We've obviously given people a lot of stuff to think about there. There's some useful kind of, homework ideas for people as well. If Steve's a bit lazy and thinks, do you know what, I don't want to do this myself. I like the sound of these two. I'm just gonna get these two to do this for me. How can people find out a bit more about what you do, or maybe get in touch with you both?
Okay, so I'm on LinkedIn quite a bit, so you could look for Lisa Betsworth, or if you want to contact me directly, it's lisa@slicesolutions.co.uk.
Lovely. And for me, so I can be found again on LinkedIn under Kat Derbyshire and under Black Cat HR, and also on my website, which is blackcat-hr.com, where there's some quite handy resources on there actually, where you can find more information specifically about taking on your first employee. So by all means, go and have a look on there and pull off the guide.
Amazing.
Excellent.
Thank you very much. We've come up with about 18 different ideas for follow-up podcasts, so we're going to get those booked in.
Yeah.
So while we do that, we'll draw this one to a conclusion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Class dismissed.
Well, thank you for your attendance today. I hope you've learned something new. Every day is a business school day after all. If you'd like to contact us or perhaps put yourself forward as a future guest, find either Nikki or myself on LinkedIn, or you can drop us a line using the links in the show notes. Right, school is out. Please wait for the bell before you leave.